get ready, because today we're going deep, like deep into this whole metal heavy thing.
Oh, yeah.
This rock and roll movie that's got everybody in Hollywood buzzing, right?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? This whole like buzz around metal heavy, it kind of makes you think about this whole other thing that's been going on, like rock music is kind of making a comeback.
Right.
And from like a totally unexpected place, too.
Exactly. That's like the first thing Cinematic Vibes picked up on, right? The podcast we're looking at today.
Yeah.
And they were like shocked, right? Like genuinely surprised that Gen Z is driving this whole rock revival.
Right.
It's not just like nostalgia, you know? It's like fresh energy.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, what do they see in rock that maybe we've kind of forgotten about?
Exactly. And that is where metal heavy comes in.
Okay.
Like, it's not just riding this wave of, oh, rock is back. It's like speaking directly to this new generation of, rock fans.
Interesting.
Imagine like a rock band today in 2024 trying to make it.
Right.
Are we talking about like stadium tours, or are we talking about like racking up streams and going viral on TikTok?
Right. Yeah.
That's the world that metal heavy is putting these characters into, right?
It's true. I mean, I hadn't even really thought about it like that, but you're right. The whole idea of making it is totally different for bands now. Like back in the day, you dreamed of record deals, MTV.
Yeah.
Now it's all algorithms and, building a fan base online. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what makes metal heavy so interesting, right? It's not just, another movie about a rock band.
Right. It's tapping into something very, very current. Right.
Yeah.
Think about it. You're a young musician. You're competing with literally millions of other artists
Oh, yeah.
on like all the same platforms for attention.
Overwhelming.
It's like this weird mix of like massive exposure and incredible pressure.
Right.
And that struggle, that's relatable.
Oh, it is.
Even if you're not like in a band.
I was just thinking that, like, who hasn't felt that pressure to like stand out online, to build a following,
Right.
to just be heard,
To break through the noise.
above the noise. Yeah. It's like the universal experience now, right?
Yeah.
And metal heavy's putting it front and center.
And they're doing it with a good sense of humor too.
Right. They said that.
Right. Yeah. Like Cinematic Vibes mentioned this one line
Okay.
where they're talking about the band and they're like a dysfunctional family.
Right. It's like, yeah, rock and roll. It's all passion. It's all dreams.
Yeah.
But it's also like the messy reality
Totally.
of like working with people.
Yeah. Especially when you're,
Especially when it's your bandmates.
yeah, and maybe your family. Yeah.
You've got the creative tension, but you've also got that like you're stuck with me bond,
Exactly. Yeah.
which I think they were getting at.
Yeah. And then there's this other quote where one of the band members says like, we're metal heavy, but we identify as hard rock.
See, that's what I love. It's like poking fun at those genre labels, that whole like gatekeeping thing that can happen in music.
Oh, yeah, totally. Especially, like, I feel like younger generations just completely blow past that.
For sure.
They're like, whatever, we're just playing music,
Totally.
And I feel like that line really gets at that.
Absolutely.
Like they're not afraid to embrace the humor, the self-awareness.
Totally.
I love it. It's refreshing.
But this authenticity,
Nice.
this like fresh take on a classic genre, we gotta give the screenwriter some credit.
That's totally.
Chase Watson.
Yeah, he's the mind behind it all, right?
Yeah.
And from what I've heard, this is like kind of a big deal for him.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, big deal, because it's like, it is and it isn't, Like,
Yeah.
it's his first, like, big project, right?
Right.
So that comes with its own kind of pressure, you know what I mean? But the folks over at Cinematic Vibes, they seem to think he was handling it pretty well.
Really?
Like, with a lot of maturity.
So he's not letting the pressure get to him?
Yeah, like, he's not cracking under pressure or anything.
Okay.
Or at least, it seems like he's channeling it into the writing pretty well.
Interesting.
Like, they were pointing out how he's able to balance that, like, serious stuff, the band's struggles, all the music industry drama. He's balancing that with some, like, really sharp humor, too.
It's a tough balance to strike.
Totally.
Because, like, on the one hand, you can go too far with the drama, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes this, like, cliche, this, like, over-the-top thing.
Totally. You end up with, like, a parody almost.
Right.
But then if you go too far with the humor, you risk, like, trivializing what are very real challenges that, musicians actually face.
Right.
So it takes, like, finesse.
Yeah, totally.
Which it sounds like Watson has.
It's like walking a tightrope almost.
Totally.
Between, like, the laughs and then, like, the realness of it all.
Yeah, for sure.
But what I like about it sounds like, is he's using the humor to actually, like, highlight those relatable struggles.
Right.
Like that line about the band being a dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's funny, but it also, like, speaks to the dynamics of any creative group, really.
Absolutely.
You know, you've got the big personalities, the clashing egos,
Right.
the shared dreams. I mean, it gets messy.
Totally. Yeah. And it's like, creative collaboration is not always
Right. It's not always pretty. And that other line, like the identifying as hard rock thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, come on, that's brilliant.
It's so good.
Right.
On so many levels.
It's like a wink and a nod to everybody who, in those communities who take those genre distinctions so seriously. You know what I mean?
It's like, yeah, we see you gatekeepers and we're not playing your game.
Exactly. And at the same time, it's so relatable, right? Like for anybody who's ever felt like they've been put in a box.
Right. Or pigeonholed.
Yeah. Like, yeah, you can label me, but I'm going to define myself on my own terms.
Right.
Like it's rebellious.
Yes.
But like with a sense of humor, which I think is very Gen Z.
And that, I think, is what might set this movie apart from, like, every other rock and roll movie that's tried to do this, right?
I think you're onto something. Like, they try to capture the energy of the music, but they totally miss, like, the cultural conversation that's happening around it.
Yeah, I think so, too.
And this one seems to get that.
Absolutely. Like, it's not just about the music. It's about, like, the whole the culture, you know?
Yeah.
The anxieties and aspirations of this moment in time.
It's capturing the zeitgeist, maybe.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so we've got a talented screenwriter, a fresh take on a classic genre, a movie that seems to be, like you said, tapping into something very real about being like a young creative person today.
Yeah.
What else? Give me the when.
Well, the $1 million question, right?
Yeah, give it to me straight.
The one that Cinematic Vibes kind of leaves us hanging with, when can we actually see this thing?
Right.
Sounds like we're going to have to wait a bit because Metal Heavy isn't supposed to hit theaters until, like, late 2025.
2025? Ugh, why did you even tell me? Now I'm going to have this on my radar for, like, forever.
Right.
Although, I will say this.
Yeah.
All this anticipation, this waiting.
Yeah.
It just kind of, like, adds to it all, the mystique.
It totally does.
I feel
the excitement.
It does.
And you know what? It gives us something to, like, really think about in the meantime, right?
Yeah, I like where you're going with this.
We've talked about rock making a comeback. We talked about this movie, like its unique spin on things, how it's culturally relevant, the screenwriter Chase Watson, right?
Right.
All this stuff. But there's, like, a bigger question here, isn't there?
Ooh, I love it when you say that. Okay, what's the bigger question?
Well, think about it, right? Everything's a reboot, a sequel.
Oh, tell me about it.
Prequels, you know?
Yeah.
Franchises that should have ended, like, years ago.
Totally.
They're just being milked for everything they're worth.
It's true.
But Metal Heavy,
Yeah.
this feels different.
Okay.
Feels like they're trying to do something original, something, like, authentic.
Right.
That's actually about the world today.
Yeah.